Let's start with the absolute foundation of this whole process so that you basically understand. So if you will understand this, then you will be able to deal with it better. Okay, because a lot of times the problem is when people don't really understand what is being asked, why it is being asked, what is the consequence of not providing what they're looking for, and thereby things go wrong. So let's take it from the beginning so I can show you exactly where what you need to do comes from. Okay, right. Okay, so this basically is the screen which is talking about, where's my screen? Oh, there's the screen. Okay, so this is basically the screen that I'm talking about, and this is referring to the Canadian immigration law. Okay, now Canadian immigration law is governed by Immigration Refugee Protection Act and then the Immigration Refugee Protection Regulations. Okay, so what I'm going to show you right now, or rather what you can see on your screen, is the I'm sorry, today I think I have a slip of a tongue a bit too often today. This or not? Okay, all right. So what you can see on your screen right now is section 75 subsection 1 and subsection 2. This is what will govern. So this is part of the regulation. Okay, so in your GCMS notes, in your documents, people who get refusal letters, rejection letters, when they see reference to R75, this is what it is talking about. This is what the reference to is for R75 subsection 1, R75 subsection 2, and this basically and primarily talks about your proof of work, and it talks about under what basis are the federal skilled worker going to be assessed. Okay, so let's just read through it quickly and then we'll come to the understanding of it. Okay, 75 section 1 subsection 1, for the purposes of subsection 12 subsection 2 of the Act, the federal skilled worker class is hereby prescribed as a class of persons who are skilled workers and who may become permanent residents on the basis of their ability to become economically established in Canada. And a lot of people ask this question several times, who intend to reside in a province other than the province of Quebec. Why? Because Quebec has its own immigration program. It is not covered under the express entry of the federal skilled worker program, and therefore if your intention is to reside in Quebec, then you will not be eligible to apply under express entry. Okay, so a lot of people ask this, a lot of people get confused. For people who reside in Montreal, who want to live in Montreal, who want to live in Quebec, express entry should not be their route for permanent residency. They should apply to Quebec's skilled worker program. Okay, now coming to the next section, skilled workers. And this is what most of you primarily would be. A foreign national is a skilled worker if within the 10 years before the date on which their application for the visa is made. Okay, so that date of application refers to AOR, acknowledgement of receipt, that you basically get once you've submitted your application. And this is where the reference to what is the validity of your period of work comes from, and this talks about the last 10 years from the date of your application that you've made. So any period of work that you have within the last 10 years can be considered as eligible for you to claim points for. So that's the first section. They have accumulated over a continuous period. Again, continuous is extremely important, and I will explain to you what continuous means. For at least 1 year of full-time work experience or the equivalent in part-time in the occupation identified by the foreign national in their application as their primary occupation. Okay, primary occupation will define your eligibility. Okay, eligibility for which you get 67 points, for which you need to score 67 points on your 100-point grid. Okay, and it has to be in the skill type 0, skill type A or B in the NOC matrix. Okay, so this is the first part of it. Second part of it is that during that period of employment, they performed the actions described in the lead statement for the occupation as set out again in the NOC matrix. Okay, listen guys, the reason why I'm reading through this with you is so that you, again, as I said, I would like you to understand where all this originates from. If you will be able to understand, you will be able to deal with this in a much better way. Okay, all right. Third section. During the period of employment, they performed a substantial number of the main duties of the occupation as set out in occupation's description, including all the essential duties. Okay, again, I will show you what they mean. And then they have submitted the results of language test, which is not concerning our today's video. And they have submitted Canadian education credential, again ECA, blah 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 blah. Okay, so for us, what matters for today's video or for today's subject is section 75 to subsection A, subsection B, subsection C. These are the three areas that you're going to concentrate on. Okay, now I am going to show you the next one, which is what are they talking about, this lead statement and NOC matrix and skill A type and B. Okay, I hope you can see this particular knockout screen. Can you? Just want to check if you can. Okay, all right, so this is NOC. I've just taken as an example, and I love this particular NOC. It sort of seems to sort of rhyme very well. 1111. Okay, financial auditors and accountants. So this is the NOC matrix for 2016, which is the most latest one, and we'll always use this one when we are assessing or when we are checking for NOC. So financial auditors and accountants is what we are looking at. Now let's read through this first portion. The first portion under the title of financial auditors and accountants is the lead summary. Okay, this is the lead statement. So when it is asking you here, section 75 to B, okay, and it says during that period of employment they performed the actions described in the lead statement for the occupation as set out in the blah blah blah. So coming back here, this is your lead statement. Now the visa officer will always be checking, because you see it's been stated in the law, it is now already set in the immigration law that your duties and responsibilities must match the lead statement or the activities in the lead statement. So what is the activities here? Let's identify some keywords, guys. Come on. Financial auditors examine. That's the first keyword here, examine. And then the next one is analyze the accounting and financial records of individuals and establishments. Okay, so this is going to be the first lead statement here. Examine and analyze the accounting and financial records. Then to ensure accuracy and compliance with the established accounting standards and procedures, blah blah blah. Then the next one is, because you see there are possibly two categories in this NOC, which is financial auditors is separate, accountants is separate. So it defines for both. Financial auditors has been defined here, and then the accountants have been defined here. So accountants plan, organize, administer accounting systems for individuals and establishments. So now you have it there. These are your lead statements. Activities in the lead statements: plan, organize, and administer. Okay, and then further on it goes on to say that this is where they are employed, this is where you will usually find them, etc., etc., etc. So they're employed by private sector accounting and auditing firms, private sector accounting, auditing departments, etc., etc. Now, very important factor, it also covers this: articling students in accounting firms are included. So a lot of you out there who have been studying ACCA and chartered accountancies and giving their CA exam, in order to become a CA you will need to complete articleship, right? So your articling period can be considered as a valid work experience because it is covered under NOC 1111. That is number one. And number two, you get paid for it. So you can claim points under a valid knock, which is 1111, and you can claim points for it because it is a paid knock. So there you go, that's the eligibility there. So this is the lead statement that we're talking about. Okay, now we'll come to the next section, and again let's go back to the law, where it says first that it says within the last 10 years, which we've already identified, and then it says during that period of employment they performed a substantial number of the main duties. Substantial number of main duties. Now it's a very subjective. You see, most of the assessment of immigration application is quite objective. You know, they go as per the law. If it states in the law, they will assess it. If it doesn't state in the law, they don't really care about it. Now, most of it is objective because it is pretty detailed and explained. Now, when it talks about the substantial number of main duties, now substantial word by itself becomes subjective. Basically means there is no parameter or there is no fixed benchmark as to what is going to be the percentage of your duties that should match. So in some cases 50% is good, so in some cases 60% is good, and trust me, in some cases even 70% is not good, because the visa officer is not, you know, is not very comfortable with what it looks like. But as long as a substantial number of duties match, I would always suggest and recommend to try and match as many as possible without thinking of this number of percentage. You see, what will also happen is in a lot of NOCs, your exact duties will not be mentioned. Okay, they will have references, they will have similar duties. So in that case, it becomes even more difficult to identify the percentage match. In some cases, you would be performing certain duties which have no direct relationship in terms of, for example, you're an accountant. Since we're talking about the accountancy, let me bring up the page again. Since we're talking about this, so you're an accountant, okay? So a lot of you out there who live and work in the Middle East for different companies in the Middle East, while you are performing job as an accountant, you will also be performing job as a public relation officer or a public relation manager. For example, you will be doing some HR duties as well. For example, you will be checking whether the work permits are valid, whether the visas are valid, whether the person has received their gratuities or end of services benefits or not. Now, those are not listed as these duties, but if your reference letters mention it, that's absolutely fine. There's no problem with it. You should only be looking to match what is exactly mentioned here in relation to your reference letters. So let's come back to this one again. Okay, now let's talk about accountants for this particular exercise. Okay, and this is the reference for accountants here. Now, again, as you will see, it says plan, set up and administer accounting systems. That is the first line. Again, your lead statement activities have been reinforced here. So they should, your reference letter should ideally include these keywords word to word. The word as a keyword should be the same keywords, or you could paraphrase it so that they mean the same. Both are fine, absolutely. But what you cannot do, what you should never do, is copy this whole thing verbatim. So basically, you cannot copy and paste the same thing in your reference letter so that you can get it easily. So that is one thing please don't do. It will always land you in trouble, whether it's a PNP application or whether it's the express entry. So avoid doing this copy paste. Paraphrase it if you wish to, but if you wish to include the keywords as it is, they are absolutely fine. You can include the keywords, paraphrase it if you wish to, but this is how you need to match the substantial duties and essential. Now in this case, these two are not the essential duties because they both start with the word may. May basically, obviously, as you all will understand, that this person may do these duties or may not perform these duties, which basically makes them as non-essential. However, these then become the essential duties, and your reference letters or your employment documents somehow should indicate that you do perform these duties. Okay, so I hope you're getting more clarity on how this whole thing works. Give me a thumbs up, guys. Come on, I need to see if you can understand what I've just said about. Now, this, dear friends, is what is called as, on the Government of Canada website or CIC website, the Gazette, the Canada Gazette. And this particular one that I've got in front of you is the Ministerial Instructions. Okay, so what happens is the IRPA, Immigration Refugee Protection Act, and Immigration Refugee Protection Regulations by the Act itself has given the authority to the Minister of Immigration to define different rules, regulations, terms, conditions under which the application will be assessed and application will be processed. So therefore, IRPA and IRPR define the guidelines under which the application will be assessed, and then the ministerial instructions further define as to how you will be given points, what will be acceptable, what will not be acceptable, what will be considered as valid, what will be not considered as valid. Okay, so this is basically new ministerial. These are ministerial instructions, and I'm going to go into the, okay, as you can see, these are ministerial instructions respecting the express entry system. And as I scroll down to the most important factor that we're going to talk about today, and if you guys have got time, please go back and read through this. It will really help you understand the process better, understand the system better, and thereby deal with your applications better. Okay, so the subject for today is because of work experience, so I'm going to come here now. Foreign work experience, and this is what we are dealing with, and our most two important sections here are this one under the ministerial, so section 25.1 and section 25.2. Now, for the purpose of section 23 and 24, it basically talks more about the points in relation to Canadian work experience, but our interest is, since it's only in the foreign work experience, this is how you're going to look at it. So section A, this work experience is acquired by a foreign national outside Canada in one or more occupations. You see, when it says one or more occupations, okay, that's what it tells you, that you can claim points for multiple NOCs, multiple periods of work, and combine it. Now that we're talking about CRS scores now, okay, so so this tells you where you can combine your periods of work and claim points for addition, or rather claim points for multiple occupations or multiple NOCs. Okay, so this is where that particular aspect comes from. So you can claim points for one or more occupations listed in skill type 0A, B or C in the NOC matrix. So that's the first part. Consists of full-time work experience or full-time equivalent of part-time work experience. Now earlier in this here it's mentioned. Okay, so what's full-time? What is full-time employment? Full-time employment for the purpose of paragraph 1b is consists of at least 30 hours per week. So that is what will make your work experience as full-time. The reason, guys, I'm stressing about all this, and I will come back to you as to why we're talking about all this, is because all this information that I'm discussing with you, which is being covered by the law, needs to be visible or evident in your documents. That is how a visa officer or a case analyst or a program assistant is going to assess your documents, is going to assess your application and give you the respective points that you're claiming for. So extremely important. And again, I keep repeating this, that if you understand the law, you will be able to deal with it better. So this is where it talks about the fact that it should say full-time employment, or it should say 30 hours per week. It also addresses the fact of work in excess. So for the purposes of section 23 and 24, again above, period of work experience that exceeds full-time work in one occupation or simultaneous periods of work experience in more than one full-time experience are to be evaluated as a single period of work experience in a single occupation. Okay, so even if you're going to try and combine it at one point of time in one period of work, it can be claimed as only one work experience. Okay, you cannot sort of say I was doing several jobs at the same point of time and claim for different jobs. It has to be only for one. And where can I bring that up? Okay, but over here somewhere in these ministerial instructions, you will also find that if you are working for more than 30 hours a week, then the work in excess is not considered. So if you work for 40 hours a week, they don't care about the extra 10 hours. They are only interested in the 30 hours per week. This is applicable to people who, for example, as per the law is required, law says you should have worked for 12 months. For federal skilled worker program, it says without any gaps. It should be continuous work period of time, and it should be within the last 10 years, NOC 0A or B, one occupation code for eligibility. Okay, and you should have completed 1,560 hours for that one year period of work. A lot of people get confused that I have completed 1,560 hours in 10 months. Can I claim 1 year? No, you cannot, because it tells you very clearly here in the ministerial instructions that any period, any excess work that you have done over 30 hours per week will not be considered. So 30 hours per week for 52 weeks will make it 1,560, which you need to do. Okay. Now coming back to the point that you're talking about. Okay. 25(1)(b) again consists of full-time work experience or full-time equivalent for part-time work experience. Okay, so basically if you have done 30 hours per week for 1 year, that's 1 year of full-time work experience. But if you have been working 15 hours per week, then you will need to work for 2 years, and that will be equivalent to 1 year of full-time work experience. Okay, now then it further on says is acquired within the 10-year period preceding the day on which the points are assigned, etc., etc. Now this is again that the fact that your work experience is valid for any period of time you worked for 10 years or within the last 10 years, which basically means, since now we are in 2020 February, now if you have work experience from say August 2010 to August 2013, and after that you have married and you become a housewife and you did not work after that, so can you claim that points? Yes, you can absolutely claim that period of 3 years as valid work experience points. Absolutely fine. Okay, so your current employment status is of no relevance in this process. as long as within the last 10 years you have qualifying period of work, which is quite clearly mentioned over here. Okay, now the next one is that in order to be assigned points, you must specify in their expression of interest. Expression of interest here refers to the express entry profile, the 4-digit NOC code that you will choose, which we have already figured out how you will look at, and you must have performed the actions described in the lead statement. Okay, again the same thing that was mentioned in the law, as well as substantial number of duties. There you go. So ministerial instructions covered, the gazette or the ministerial instructions covered, and the immigration law covered to explain to you what are the 3 important factors that CIC is looking for in your work experience. Now finally, I'm going to switch this one off. I'm going to close this tab. I'm going to close this tab, and then I'm going to come to the most important factor. How do you prove your work experience? So what I have on the screen right now is applications of permanent residence programs subject to the express entry completeness check. So basically, when you submit your express entry application, it has to first go through the R10 check. R10, as we understand, and it is mentioned over here. Applications are assessed for completeness upfront. An application found to be incomplete should be rejected as per the section 10 of the Immigration Refugee Protection Regulations. Regulations stands for R, so R10. So when you hear A, it refers to the Immigration Refugee Protection Act. Whenever you see an R, it refers to the regulations. If you ever are interested in finding out more, you can always Google for them, and if, for example, R75.1, if you Google, you will be able to come to the regulations and then study the law, what it talks about. Now here, this is what it talks about. If you do not submit a complete application, your application should be rejected. That is what it refers to, and again, that is a very straightforward understanding. It should be rejected. There is no obligation for CIC to ask you for additional documents. There is no obligation for them to say, oh sorry, you forgot to upload your passport copy, can you please send it? No, it is not going to work. Or you forgot to upload your PCC, can you send it? No, they don't have to do it. Rather, they have been instructed very clearly by the law that they should reject the application, straight and simple. Okay, and again it further says all fees associated would be refunded. So this what we are talking about is the completeness check. We will talk about what has to be there in your documents for them to pass the completeness check, and we are for purpose of today's subject of today's discussion is only about proof of work experience, and that is what we're going to be restricted to. While there are lots of other details mentioned over here, I am going to talk only about proof of work experience, and I seem to have lost. Okay, I've got it here. Here is where the entire description of proof of work experience is mentioned by CIC to state this is what you need in order for your application to pass the completeness check, and from there on then go into what we refer to as assessment. Okay, and that will be under A11.2. Now A again means Immigration Refugee Protection Act, section 11 subsection 2. Now in this case, proof of work experience, CIC says to prove each work experience claim and to validate the application that the applicant meets program requirements, you need to provide you need to go as per the personalized checklist that will be appearing in your application. At the completeness check, which is the R10, the office is only determining whether your documents are included or not. The assessment, the check for fraudulence is not happening as of right now. That will happen once it goes into the assessment phase. Okay, now following documents are mandatory. Okay, you can even see that this particular word has been put in block. Okay, see in this whole text, only this word is in block, which tells you that these are the mandatory documents which you must provide. Okay, a reference or experience letter from the employer. So you could use either of the terminologies. In this particular context, it means the same thing. Whether you call it an experience letter, whether you call it a reference letter, it's the same thing. It should be an official document. When we say official document, means it has to be a company letterhead, and it is printed on company letterhead again. It must include the applicant's name, the company's contact information, Okay, the address, telephone, email address, etc., etc. The name, the title, and the signature of the immediate supervisor or personal officer of the company. Now, this forms the baseline for your document. It tells you that it has to be on your company letterhead, so it has to be an official document. It can't be somebody just writing it on a plain piece of paper and giving it to you. It has to be on your company's official letterhead, which basically will include your company's logo, your company's name, address, phone number, email address, etc., etc. Whoever is going to sign that, okay, in this case, overly, it refers to your immediate supervisor or the personnel officer. Personnel officer refers to the HR. Immediate supervisor refers to your reporting manager, reporting supervisor, reporting department head, etc., etc. In a lot of smaller companies, it could be the owner of the company, the proprietor of the company, the managing director of the company, the general manager of the company. It doesn't really matter, as long as it is a person in authority who you are reporting to. Okay, so that is what this indicates. The next one is should indicate all positions held while employed at the company. All positions is again important, and must include the following details. Now see, this is the following details that you need to include: job title, duties and responsibilities, job status, that is if you're still working or you were working earlier, dates worked for the company, from which date to which date, number of work hours per week, so 30 hours per week, 40 hours per week, 60 hours per week, 20 hours per week, excuse me. Or if it cannot mention the working hours, it should at least say that you're working full time. Okay, and your annual salary or benefits and plus benefits, whatever you received. Okay, now if you will pay attention to what I've highlighted here on the screen, this is the crux of the immigration law specifying your requirement of your work experience. Now it covers three important things that we've been talking about in the last almost half an hour. Okay, and those three important things are your NOC, okay, your period of work, since from when to when did you work. I mean, if was it within the last 10 years, did you're claiming points for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever, and whether you are paid or not. Okay, all these three things will constitute as your valid work experience claim. Now, job duties and responsibilities will validate your NOC. Job status, whether it is current or the dates worked, will validate your period of work. So let's say within the last 10 years I'm claiming points for 3 years, and so this will validate your period of work. Number of working hours will again validate your period of work, so whether it was 30 hours per week, full time, 20 hours per week, part time, etc., etc., all that will again validate. And one of the most important things to validate your work experience, that should be paid work experience. It can't be voluntary work experience. Even if you're an articling student, if you are articling as a dentist, if you are articling as a accountant for a CA position or in a CA firm, your work experience should be paid. It cannot be unpaid internship. So any period of internship which was paid under a valid NOC within the last 10 years, you can claim points for it. It has been clearly mentioned in the ministerial instructions or the law. Okay, again, annual salary plus benefits, this will then further validate that your work experience was valid because it was paid. Okay, so this particular section is the most important section which you need to refer to when preparing your reference letters. Okay, now further it comes down to talk about people who are self-employed. Self-employed are those people who have their own business. Okay, maybe they are freelancers, maybe they are working from home, or they have their own company, or they have their own incorporation, or they have their own small business, they have their own consulting company, etc., etc. So several ways of defining how the person is self-employed, but this defines what is required if you are self-employed. Okay, so which basically also tells you that if you're self-employed, you can still claim points under the Federal Skilled Worker Program. You can still apply under Federal Skilled Worker Program under Express Entry. Now, if the applicant is self-employed, articles of incorporation, which basically will establish how your business was set up, or whether you're a partner, whether you are an owner, whether you're a shareholder, and other evidence, or other evidence of business ownership. So if your company was not incorporated, it's not an LLC, it is not a private limited, it is not a some sort of a corporate formation, any other evidence of business ownership. So if you are, for example, consulting, in your individual capacity, then provide proof that you can provide consultation through the regulatory body, which will give you that particular certification to practice as that a consultant. Or you're a sole proprietor, then provide GST, provide ownership of being the business owner, provide any municipal document, any government document that states that you are the business owner there. Then evidence of self-employment income. You have to then prove that your business or your occupation was generating income for it to be considered valid. Again, it has to be valid period of work. Sorry, it has to be paid period of work for it to be considered valid. And therefore you have to then provide evidence of self-employment income. So you will show invoices, you will show payment being received in your bank accounts, etc., etc. And then the documentation from third-party individuals indicating the service provided along with the payment details. Again, now you need to prove your NOC. So the NOC will be proven by the fact that you will get documents, because you can't give a letter to yourself. You can't say I, Kuber Kamal, am the owner of Ask Kuber company, and I am providing these services of helping people, blah blah blah, whatever, and my duty is that I plan, organize, do this, whatever you want to call it. Okay, I cannot give that letter to myself. That is not acceptable. That does not establish credibility. So you will provide. I had a thought in my head, sorry. So you will provide documents to prove your work experience by way of reference letters from your clients, okay? Your clients, your third-party clients, your vendors, people who you've been providing services to, they need to give you these documents to show that you have been performing these duties, and that is what will establish your work experience as a self-employed individual. Now, it further goes on to state that for the people who are working in Canada, you also need to provide your pay stubs, your T4 tax information, your notice of assessments, etc., etc. All these details need to be provided. Then it further goes on to tell that this documentation has to be provided by the principal applicant, because you are getting points for this principal applicant. And then the next one is extremely important for a lot of people who do not claim spouse work experience, is you have to provide this documentation for your spouse or common law partner if work experience in Canada is claimed, because as most of you would already know by now that you can get points only for spouse's work experience. If that work experience was in Canada, Canadian work experience, you do not get points for spouse's foreign work experience. Foreign in this case meaning outside Canada. Oh, clear? I hope this is clear. Okay, now let's get back to our screen here. Oh man. Oof, reading so much today. All reading practices happening for me. Okay, let me see. Now that I have explained to you sections of law, ministerial instructions, completeness check, NOC database, what is valid, what is not valid, what is a lead statement, what are the activities in the lead statement, substantial, blah blah blah, it has to be paid, etc., etc., etc. I hope you now understand and get the grasp of what CIC is looking for and what will render your application under review required or under incomplete if you do not provide the documentation. One more small thing before we go on, and I will get to that in a minute, because I also now need to start looking at the questions, because a lot of you have been posting so many questions. I will remind you, today's subject is proof of work experience, reference letters, how to get them if you can't get them, if your employer gives it to you, doesn't give it to you, etc., etc. Any other questions outside this particular subject, I will not address them, I will not look at them, because honestly then we'll keep deviating off topic and it won't really help. Okay, so we will take questions. Excuse me. Before I take questions, I will tell you what happens in a case an employer is not willing to give you the reference letters, because once I give you that details, then a lot of those questions will get answered anyways. Okay, now what I've just shown you earlier is the requirement that CIC has, or expectation that CIC has, in terms of what you should prove, or rather how you should prove your work experience, and those are the official requirement of documents. Now, we are not in an ideal world, and we are not in the most ideal situation. A lot of things don't happen the way we wish for them to happen. So a lot of you out there, your company is closed down. Okay, your company has a policy where they do not issue documents as required by CIC or IRCC, if you want to call them. Your employer or your manager is a total, I mean, whatever, you know that, and for some reason he is holding it against you and will not issue this document to you. Or if you were to apply for this document, then you are afraid that your employment might be in some sort of a danger. I mean, your company might ask you to resign, or there are companies who will only provide you such documents after you resign. So in all these cases where you really cannot obtain a document, where you really cannot get a reference letter, what are you going to do, right? So and that becomes a question for a lot of people. So let's address that. You'd always need to prove three things which are the most important ones. The first one is the period of your work. So from when to when were you working? Because you need to be given points, or your work experience is only valid if, is only valid if at all your period of work experience is within the last 10 years. So that is the most important factor. Second is your period of work experience is defined by the fact that you should have worked for at least 30 hours a week, or it should be full-time employment. So that will define your period of work. For example, you could have worked for 3 years, but it could have been part-time, or it could have been 20 hours a week, 25 hours a week. So it cannot equate to 3 years of valid work experience. Therefore, you need to provide a period of work from how long, from when to when, and how many hours per week. Okay, so that is the first thing that has to come out clearly in your documents. The second is you are paid or not paid. Okay, a lot of times companies will mention everything else in your reference letter, but they will not mention the salary, because a lot of you out there use these kind of letters to then go to a competitor and show them this document and then ask for a raise. So a lot of companies, out of that fear, do not issue salaries on a document and give it to you. And what happens in such cases? First of all, the requirement is that you have to provide them that your work experience was paid, that you were paid for this period of work experience. So you need to provide alternative documents again. The third thing that has to be included, or you have to provide proof of, is your choice of NOC, National Occupation Classification Code, 4-digit code, which will define whether you are eligible to work, or whether you are eligible for express entry or not, whether you are eligible for fertile skilled worker program or not, and now most importantly, whether you can claim these important points. So these three factors: period of work, whether you are paid or not, NOC. If you can provide alternative, valid, acceptable documents to prove these three things, you're done. No problem. You are fine. Nothing will happen. Your application will go through fine, and you will become permanent resident soon. Now you need to think out of the box. Your company, if your manager is not able to provide these documents to you, if your company has closed down, what can you do to provide these three things? Period of work. You can start by looking at your employment offer letter, employment letter, period of commissioning, or other date of commissioning, date of start, date of probation completed, date of internship completed. All these kind of letters that companies give, that becomes your starting formation, establishing your period start date. Then once you resign, if you were terminated, if you were asked to leave, if you left by your own record, that relieving letter, etc., that could have, will then establish your end date. Okay, so that is one. Or you could go back to your company and ask for a service certificate. Service certificate basically is issued by most companies without any problem, or an employment certificate. Most companies will issue it for you without any problems, and it just states that you work for that company from so and so period to so and so period. Okay, if you get that, again, excellent, because now that has taken care of definition of your period of work. If that letter can further add whether you're working for 30 hours a week or whether you're a full-time employee, then again, that also takes care of the second part of the first issue, which is how many hours did you work for. Again, extremely important, but you will need to provide these details. Second one is your payment. Now, how will you establish your payment? Payment will come through the fact that you were paid, right? And so provide pay stubs or pay slips, both mean the same thing. Provide bank statements that show salary credit into your account. Or get a salary certificate from your company, because a lot of people take credit cards, a lot of people take loans, and all there is always a requirement that you have to prove salary statement from your account, from your bank, from your company. So get a salary statement or a salary schedule, or a full year salary, what do they call it, salary statement, if you want to call it again. But you can get these documents easily from your company. If you cannot, then I'm sure you were always issued a pay stub when you were getting salary. Most of the companies do. Again, a lot of them don't, but we'll come to that. So get a pay stub, get a pay slip, bank statements that show salary credits, IT returns, income tax returns. Again, very, very important. A lot of you get Form 16s from your company. You can use that because the Form 16 identifies your income, also identifies the name of your company. Again, that will help. Income tax return again helps to show income during that period of time. All these can help you prove that you were paid. Now, a lot of people, a lot of companies get salaries in cash. That is absolutely fine and acceptable. There is no problem, not with the province, not with the PNP program, not with the express entry. There is no issue whatsoever. I just showed you some laws and some ministerial instructions and the CIC website completeness check. Nowhere is it talking about the fact that cash salary is not acceptable. Nowhere. It doesn't say that at all. It is acceptable. We've had so many of cases that my team has handled. Cash salary was not a problem. We've had so many clients. We currently have so many clients. Saskatchewan, no problem. Ontario, no problem. Nova Scotia, no problem. Manitoba, no problem. Express entry, of course. Federal Skilled Worker Program, no problem. Cash salary is no problem. It doesn't work for CEC though. Okay, Canadian Experience class, it doesn't work. We will come to that separately. But for Federal Skilled Worker Program, cash salary is not a problem. Not a problem. I'm sorry, a lot of slip of tongue happening today. Maybe I'm talking too much, or maybe my throat is going dry too often. What you need to get, again, you need to show pay stubs. Okay, if you cannot show pay stubs, your company may maintain a voucher or may maintain a register where they ask you to sign once you get paid, because all companies need to maintain an account, right? So if they're making you a payment, it will be recorded somewhere. So provide a copy of that. Provide a copy of cash voucher slip given to you. Provide a copy of a register where they make you sign, which states that your salary was paid to you. Get a salary certificate from your company. Tell them to write for you and state very clearly separately in a salary certificate that you were paid a salary from so and so period to so and so period. This was your salary and it was paid in cash, because that is that company's policy to pay everybody in cash. This is absolutely fine. If during that period you were still filing your taxes, provide it. If you are not filing taxes, it is not a problem. Okay, again, it is not a mandate. It is not a mandatory requirement. I showed you, nowhere did it say that you have to have tax documents, you have to provide those are additional optional documents that always help in your application. It supports your application. It makes your application more credible. It gives it sort of that strong base to show that that yes, you were paid, yes, you did what you were saying you did. Now, the third and the most important one is your NOC. How will you validate your NOC if your company is not giving you a document? Now, you can get a document done from your manager or your supervisor or your senior colleague. Okay. In some cases, the company will very clearly, so for example, you write an email to your company, hey guys, please, I need this document, can you please issue for me because I'm applying for Canadian PR. Very simple, very straightforward. And the company will return back and say, no, we're sorry, we do not give you this kind of documents, it's not a company policy. Now, that becomes a proof for you to show to CIC that my company is not willing to give me a document, so I'm giving you alternative documents. Okay. A lot of companies will not even send you this email. In that case, go back to your HR policies. Check your HR policy documented where it says that they will not issue such kind of documents to you. Again, take a copy of that, give it to them. Go to your company's website where it in details they might list your HR policies. Again, take a copy, take the link, give it to CIC and say this is where they say we will not give it to you. If you still don't have it, that's fine. You go back to your manager, plead, request, take him out for a drink, take him out for lunch, take him out for coffee, and explain to him why you need this document, explain to him, and have that individual write this document for you in their personal capacity. Okay. So the same document has to be written. He or she will write it in their personal capacity, saying that you have performed these duties, you were working from so and so period to so and so period, so many hours a week, your salary was so and so, and these are your duties and responsibilities. These duties and responsibilities, as I just showed you and we just discussed, should match and should validate the NOC that you have chosen. It is extremely, extremely important. Please do not underestimate this particular factor. Okay. Sometimes CIC can come back and ask you for income tax returns, pay slips, proof of bank, proof of bank statements to show salary credits, because that is where they want to establish more information to see whether you were really paid or not. But if they find your NOC does not match, if they find that your reference letters do not validate the NOC. If they find that your reference letters does not even talk about your NOCs, they will not come back. They don't have to come back. They will, in most cases, they will refuse your application. They will never come back and ask you, hey, you know what, your reference letter does not talk about your NOC, please can you get me another one. They will not do that. Okay, so your application will face this huge risk of getting refused outright. Please don't take that risk. Please understand that you need to validate these three things I've told you, and NOC being the most important factor. Okay, sometimes if your documents do not talk much about your salary or about your payment proof, trust me, CIC will come back and ask you for more details. But if your reference letter is missing the NOC details, then you are in very troubled waters. So please pay a lot of attention to your NOC. It must match, it must include all the essential duties, it must include the lead statement or the activities on the lead statement, and that is what will complete your document. So once you have obtained a document from your manager or your colleague, there is no requirement to notarize this document. First of all, I must clarify that. Okay, I know we all talk about it, getting a notarized affidavit from your colleague or from your manager or from your department head. First of all, there is no mandate. I just showed you the requirements. I just showed you where CIC asks for documents and what they ask for documents. Nowhere does it state that they will accept an affidavit. Okay, so affidavit is not a mandate requirement. We suggest and recommend that you provide a notarized affidavit, and the reason for that is, in Canada, a notarized document has more credibility. Okay, what does a notary mean? Notary means that a person who has been authorized by law, by the law of that land, is in a position to validate a document and state that this person who has signed is the person who this document says is. So for example, if if I sign a document and I want to get it notarized, the lawyer will excuse me. So if I want to get a document notarized, the lawyer will first check my identity documents, my proof of identity, and then in front of the lawyer I must sign. I will have to sign the document so that the lawyer can then notarize the document and say, yes, Kubair Kamal has signed this document, because he attests to the fact that he checked my identity documents and I was the one who signed it in front of him. So that is the reason why a notarized document has more credibility. That is the only reason why we recommend and suggest that get it done, get a notarized document. But if for whatever reason you cannot get a notary done, maybe the person is in a different country, maybe he's unwilling to get the notary done, or you can't get a notary done because of that country doesn't have public notaries. I'm sure they will still have lawyers. Lawyers can still notarize documents. But if for whatever reason you can't do that, there is no requirement. But then in that case, please try and provide a business card of the person who's signing, preferably a copy of the ID card, etc., etc. Now, in cases, what happens when a company has closed down and the person is no longer working over there, you are not working, your manager is not working over there anymore, so how do you get it? So in that case, again, please go back to, first of all, the senior management, if you could. For example, the managing director, the owner, the proprietor, the shareholders, the partners, any one of them who were in the ownership or in the senior executive management position, and if they are still willing to write it for you, okay, take a document from them, get it notarized if you can. In addition to that, obviously you will have to provide a lot of your documents from your past, saying which will show that you were working, in terms of your employment letter, your pay stubs, your bank statements, your credit, your bank, your proof of having transferred salaries. So all that supporting documents will come. But for the reference letter, you can again get it done by your ex-manager, ex-colleague. Now, because your manager or colleague is no longer working in that company, they will then need to give you an additional document stating, now that has to be notarized. Again, the reason for notary is again for credibility, where they will state that yes, I, Kubair Kamal, was working for company X, Y, and Z, and during my employment with this company from so and so period to so and so period, Mrs. Kubair Kamal was also working in this company in this and this position. I worked with this person. This person was reporting to me in so and so capacity, and this person has approached me to write this letter, and I am doing it because I can verify that this person did. For some reason the screen is not working, so we shall go back to our old screen, and then I will still read out the questions here to see what we can look at. Okay, Praveen Parmar says, should we send the additional documents along with the reference letter or when asked for afterwards? Praveen, good question. I always recommend to provide it upfront during your application submission, and the reason for that is uh, more is better. When I mean more, I mean in any which ways, if you can provide additional documents that makes your application more supportive, more credible, it's always better. Don't wait for them to ask it. So if you have income tax returns, please provide. If you have pay slips, pay stubs, please provide. Even if your reference letter mentions your salary, if you have pay slips, pay stubs, please provide. If you have bank statements, old bank statements that show your salary credit, please provide. By providing these details, you are avoiding any instance where CIC may have to come back and ask you for these documents. It is just, it just gives more credibility to your documents. So yes, again, all these documents that I mentioned are not mandatory. Okay, they are not required by specific that you must provide this. CIC may only ask them for you if they are not satisfied, if they wish to see more, information or details where they can establish whether you were paid or not. So for example, if you did not have an income tax document, you don't need to provide it. If you cannot get hold of your bank statements to show salary credit, you don't need to provide it. It's absolutely fine. But if you have them, please provide it. Okay. Okay. Another question is, I got my reference letter of 2282 I suppose is your NOC from Amazon. Is it mandatory to have a point which says that I am a full-time employee in the reference letter, or will it suffice if it is mentioned in the pay slips? Now, as I explained to you, that either your documents must prove that you work for 30 hours a week, or it must show that you are a full-time employee, either of the two. But that should, or rather that would establish your validity of your work experience period. For example, if your documents do not mention you're a full-time employee, it does not mention you are a 30 hours per week at least, then how will CIC know that was it a part-time employment or a full-time employment? Should you get points for your 1 year of work experience or not? Should you get points for 2 years of work experience or not? So now you're putting them in a questionable state, whereby either they will ask you for additional documents or they have a right to. So provide information just the way I've explained to you, why they need it, how they need it, and if you do that, then you should not have a problem. Okay, Nidhi is asking why firm did not issue me any appointment letter. He had denied giving me a reference letter as well. What if I provide a reference letter signed from a senior and provide bank statements? Will it work? Well, Nidhi, I have just gone into details and explained what you can provide, how you can provide, or what all documents you can provide as an alternative. You see, the onus, the burden of proof is on your shoulders. You have to see in what ways possible can you provide them the proof that you were working for so many years, you were paid, you did these duties. All this is your responsibility. There are a lot of cases where the reference letters are not provided or the duties are not mentioned. You can provide them your job description. You can give them the link of your company's website where your position has been mentioned and the job description has been mentioned. You can provide them your employment letter where your job description was mentioned. And if those job descriptions match with the NOCs you have chosen, you're fine. Okay. So you will have to think how you can prove to CIC that you did perform what you are saying you performed. Okay. All this information that I'm giving you, it may not apply to a lot of you, but it may apply to most of you. And in some cases, there could be those isolated cases where none of this applies to you. But I wish I could address every single situation. I can't. In such cases, guys, if you are one of those, as I said, you will need to think out of the box. You will need to figure out how you can prove and provide these three important informations to CIC so that they can give you the points for your valid work experience. Now, take another question. Mandeep Singh Kapoor says, I have my NOC code as 2174. My job was information security professional. My reference letter states me as software engineer along with job duties. Software engineer is a different NOC. Will it work? Okay, good question. When you are deciding on your NOC, if you noticed, I showed you the applicable law, I showed you the applicable statutes, I showed you where it says what you need to do, I showed you the ministerial instructions. Nowhere did it talk about your job title. Okay, it does ask for a job title to be listed in your reference letter, but nowhere is the validation of your knock got to do with your job title. Your validating a knock is only got to do with your duties and responsibilities. So the activities in the lead statement and substantial number of duties. If these three are mentioned, you could call yourself a general manager, you could call yourself a prime minister, you could call yourself a janitor, you could call yourself an assistant, whatever you wish to call. What matters is what are the listed duties and responsibilities for that particular knock. That is what will validate the knock. You see, and the reason, I'll give you the reason also for this, because giving a reason is always important, because that is what establishes the baseline for you, for your understanding and logic. There are more than nearly, I mean, there's always a dispute, but there are more than 200 countries in the world. Now, in those 200 countries of the world, people are applying from all over the world for Canadian permanent residency. Different jobs have different titles, okay, and how do you create a standard benchmark for all of them? So for example, a person who's an administrative assistant in India and called an administrative in India could be called vice president of administration in Canary Islands or in some part of Africa or in Australia. They could call it, they could call that position by a totally different name or different title, but the job is the same. So for example, you could be a vice president administration, reporting to your managing director, and you're performing the same duties. Your knock code will be defined by your duties and responsibilities, not by your title. I hope that clarifies. Okay. Rajesh Ravindran says, for teachers, the full-time employment for 1 year is 10 months and 2 months is annual off. Will that be considered as 1 year continuous work experience? For the 2 months, it is paid vacation. Now, Rajesh, good question. It is a problem which occurs with a lot of people out there who are teachers. If your period of employment is mentioned as 12 months, including 2 months of paid vacation, being a teacher, it's absolutely fine. But if your 2 months was not paid, or if you are in a contract jobs that says your contract is for 10 months, after that you go for 2 months of unpaid leave, then you come back and again you start a contract for 10 months, in that case that is not a continuous work experience. Okay, so that will not be accepted. But if your work experience was continuous, was paid, and if it was part of that, if you were getting paid vacation and that was part of your employment period, then that's absolutely fine. Okay. Aishwarya says, I understand the title does not matter, but actually can my job title be different in Ontario PNP application and PR application? Why would it be that, Aishwarya? Why will your title be different in Ontario PNP application, PR application? If for that period of time you worked as XYZ designer, so for the same period of time, whether you are applying in Ontario or in Express Entry, your job title will remain same. Why will your job title change? I'm not very clear with that. So if you are working at a particular position as with a particular title, it will remain same whether you provide a document for Ontario or whether you provide a document for Express Entry. I would not understand why would it be different. Anil Kumar says, can I use the same documents from Saskatchewan and then to CIC? Yes, you can. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. Canada Job Bolre says, sorry for asking too many questions. Yes, you're asking too many questions. Okay, you should be put in jail for that. Okay, sorry. While preparing my reference letters, I have copied and pasted around 5 to 6 out of 12 job responsibilities. They are valid though. Will it be a problem? It could be a problem. It becomes subjective. Why would you copy and paste? Don't copy and paste. Paraphrase it, man. I'm sure you can find tons and tons of words on thesaurus or on Google dictionaries, where you can choose and paraphrase it. Don't copy paste. Don't put yourself in a trouble. Don't put yourself in a situation where CIC will ask you for more documents or put you under review required. So don't do that. Okay. Okay, Kavita says, I got promoted, but now I don't have its letter. Later I got an increment and I have its letter. When providing same docs, leaving some create ambiguity. No, it doesn't create ambiguity, because your employment letter or your reference letter should mention all positions. If the duties and responsibilities are different, then the reference letter should mention different duties and responsibilities for different positions. Or your reference letter can say that though you worked as software designer, lead software designer, super lead software designer as 3 different designations, but if your duties and responsibilities were same, then the reference letter can mention that during this period of time for all these 3 titles you perform the same duties, and that's absolutely okay. There is no ambiguity there. Chigi Verma says, can I show work experience full-time while pursuing MBA regular course simultaneously? Yes, you can. There's no problem with that. You can show it. Do explain in your letter of explanation as to how did you manage to study and work at the same time. There is no problem. Again, we have several examples and cases where it was absolutely accepted. As long as this work experience and your period of study is outside Canada, it's absolutely fine. No problem. Mega Kerala says, I am currently working in a government care home appointed by an NGO. So where I need to get reference letter? Well, technically you should get a reference letter from the entity that is paying your salary. So that is the entity, because they're paying your salary, they're the ones who should define what your job roles and responsibilities is. Okay. Okay, Aishwarya then says, it is based on standard reference letter. My company has provided it as project lead, but in my application it is lead engineer. Again, what you mention in your application should match with your reference letter, because that is your job title. If your job title is project engineer, it should be same in both the places. Why would you call yourself lead engineer in your project, in your application, whereas your actual job title was project lead? So, you know, try and maintain consistency, and that will always, you know, remove any ambiguity or any issues there. Suraj Bobade says, is it compulsory to show a document where the company says that it does not issue an NOC letter? I'm asking this because what if I want to keep it a secret from my HR? Well, absolutely, your good question. No, it is not a requirement. It is not mandatory, but if you can get it, it always again makes it easier for the visa officer to accept the affidavit you have provided from your manager and move on. Because you see, whenever you do not provide the documents to CIC based on what they required or requested in the first place, then the discretion applies. Okay, then it is simply the visa officer's discretion to accept your documents or not to accept your document. So if you give them a good reason to accept it, it will sail through easily. If not, then you could, you see, now that's a tricky one to explain. Now the law is very clear. The law tells you exactly what needs to be done. The law tells you what all needs to be included as documents. Then the ministerial instructions give you further details as to what they expect to see, how they will assess it. So these are all objective parameters of assessing your application. Now, when you do not provide this, then you are giving CIC a reason to be subjective. Then you are giving the reason to CIC to sort of say, okay, I'm not in a good mood today. I don't like to do this assessment very nicely because, you know, these documents are not complete. So I don't think this person was working here. Why? Because, you know, you are providing them documents which is absolutely on their discretion to accept it or not. So before you fall into that area where then they will assign you as review required, then a senior visa officer needs to take a call on it and take a call on you know, given all the material evidence you have provided. So instead of getting into the situation, if you can provide them reasons why you are not able to provide the document in the first place, that will always help your application, help your cause, and then you do not have to go around blaming the visa offices for being slow. A lot of people come and say Delhi visa office is slow, others will say Nova Scotia is slow, then they'll say Edmonton is slow, then they will say Sydney is slow. Hardly anybody will say any visa office is fast. Then some of them will come and say no, Ottawa is fast. But have you, do you know, so many people in Ottawa are stuck for years and they're still waiting. So none of the visa offices are fast and none of the visa offices are slow. They are all working based on the same parameters that they have been given. It is your application which will in most cases define how fast and how slow your processing will work. Okay, so always pay attention to that. If you do not give them a chance to slot your application under review required, then it will not be under review required and it will sort of go through easily because you have given them all reasons to, you know, process it nicely and easily. Okay, Anju Bala says self-employed people, proof of income or documents required. Self-employed people, proof of income or documents required. Great question, Anju. I have another video. Right now you're watching this YouTube video. This is on my channel. Guys, have you subscribed? I can see right now 78 people. All 78 of you, have you subscribed or not? If you haven't subscribed, you know, not good, you know. All this time, all this effort, all this bad throat and dry throat. At least subscribe, man. Come on, guys. Okay, to answer your question, Anju, on the same channel that I have, there is another video which is much more detailed, and it talks about self-employed work experience. I do recommend you watch that video, and that will give you a lot of information as to how self-employed individuals can apply for work experience, or rather how they can validate their work experience. But to give you an answer very quickly, as proof of income, you will need to show your bank statements, your IT returns of your company, not yourself, your company, to show that this company was generating income. You will show copies of invoices, you will show copies of checks or payments or payment vouchers to show that you received payments from your clients, it was coming into the bank accounts, and you will show the entire transaction history. This will establish that your company, while it was in existence, was generating income. Profit and loss is not the criteria, that is not a concern of CIC. They just need to know that while you are working, while you are self-employed, was your company generating income? Were you being paid for your effort? That is what matters. Okay. Mahmudus Manasalam says, what if somebody works for a startup venture and the salary was paid in cash, and the salary paid is not good enough as the top ranked companies? First of all, the amount of money you receive for your as a compensation is of no relevance to CIC. Yes, sometimes they use that to identify if there is any fraud taking place, if somebody is sort of just trying to claim certain things where they're not. But you can always challenge that in court, because the law does not specify, or the law does not talk about the amount of salary that you should be paid for that position. So that is not a problem. Second, about cash salary, well, I just explained a bit a while ago that how you can claim or how you can show documents to prove your cash salary. Get a salary certificate, show cash payment vouchers, show cash pay slips, pay stubs, yeah, and you're good, absolutely fine. Anil Kumar says, are specific details like hours worked per week and salary important details, since it is Anil Kumar, that is all I've been talking about for the last 1.5 hours, man. Come on. Ripin Tomar says, the company I worked for was very small, even not registered, and is closed now. How CIC would verify my reference letter? Well, Ripin, first of all, it is entirely CIC's prerogative as to how they will check your reference letter. But you will need to provide them enough documents to prove your prove your employment period during that time. They could contact the person who's signing the documents. They could contact the person. They could do a social media check. They could check the company's registration, whether the company existed or not. There are several ways of doing it, but as I said, it is entirely on CIC as to how they choose to do verification. Okay. Chigi says, my company has been shut down. I only have 3 documents: offer letter, experience letter, cash salary receipts. Yes, that is absolutely fine, but you will still need a reference letter to provide your knock, to prove your knock. So you will need to get a reference letter from any one of your ex-colleagues, senior managers, owner of the company, to prove validate your knock. Then there is Praveen. Okay, Praveen, we already answered that question. Okay, Suraj says, can a work experience of 2 years and 11 months be said to be of 3 years? Suraj, read your statement, my friend. Read it. You are saying, can a work experience of 2 years and 11 months be considered as 3 years? Why? Why will you consider 2 years and 11 months as 3 years? Think about it, man. What you're writing and what you're saying. 3 years means 36 months. Okay. 52 multiply. I'm not very good with maths, but we'll do this anyways. Okay, hold on. Okay, guys, we need to answer this question. 52 multiplied by 3. 156 weeks. You need to work for 156 weeks. You need to work for 36 months to claim 3 years of work experience. How and why will 2 years and 11 months be considered as 3 years? Why? Answer the question yourself, my friend. Gary says, is it necessary for Federal Express entry that my education and proof and my work experience should match? No, it is absolutely not necessary. On the contrary, the ministerial instructions and the public policy very clearly state that the employment requirements that is mentioned in the knock database, in the knock matrix, which states that this person should have done this degree, should have got this certificate to do this job, none of that is relevant for your assessment in express entry. So your field of education and your work don't need to match for express entry. Okay, but it definitely needs to match for Saskatchewan. Weber Patel says, what is the reference letter issued by my HR does not match duties under my NOC, but I have performed many of the duties during my employment. Well, if your reference letter does not match the NOC, my friend, then how are you going to prove to CIC that you did perform the duties under that NOC? Yeah, something to think about. Yeah. Okay. Avrojyoti Barwa says, my spouse is co-applicant and she is a government employee. Can I show her PF account? We are not answering, my friend, any question which is not related to proof of work experience. Vinayak says, how can I get job in Canada? I don't know, my dear friend. Please check online. Aishwarya says, okay, Aishwarya, we are repeating these questions again and again. I've already clarified to you. Please go back and just go through the same answers. If the period of work has changed from what you are applied in your PNP and from now, then your current period, obviously you can add that in your express entry profile as your current. But I still do not understand why your title will be different from the past to the current. I mean, if the same period of work applied. Then Anil says, hi Kuber, can fixed deposits, okay, we are not answering anything which is not proof of work experience question. Monish says, good question, please guide, if my spouse works in my company, will they consider my spouse's work experience? Good question, Monish. Over here, there is no reason for them to not accept, except that there is a serious issue of credibility. Now, it is entirely up to you how you prove, or rather how you provide credible evidence to show that while your wife was working in your company, this was genuine work experience. Provide lots of experience, a lot of documents to prove that. But technically, yes, there is nothing wrong with it. There is no harm whether you're working for your spouse, whether you're working for your father, whether you're working for your son, whether you're working for your brother or sister in the same company, no problem. There is technically no requirement that you cannot work for your own sibling or relatives. Absolutely no issue with that. But you will, as I said, the burden of proof is on you. You will need to provide something credible for them to accept this work experience. Suparna says, should you have worked for at least 1 year in that organization for the work experience to be considered? What if I work for 5 months in one year in another, and so on and so forth? Suparna, good question again. You need to have 12 months of continuous work experience in one occupation to be eligible in express entry. After you have become eligible, you can combine other periods of work with different companies under different NOCs to have a collective period of work for your CRS score. Please watch my video about multiple NOCs. It is on the same channel. I mean, if you will just scroll down to the list of videos, you will be able to see a video on how you can claim points from multiple NOCs. That will explain to you much more better. Okay. Donald says, if a company is not willing to address the letter as to whomsoever it may concern, what other options do we have? Well, if your company is not willing to address it to whomsoever it concerns, for Saskatchewan, you can address it to Immigration Officer, Saskatchewan Immigration Nominee Program, Saskatchewan. And the same letter you can use for CIC. There is no problem with it. No problem whatsoever. Okay, Chigi again says, I got a suggestion that work experience after graduation is only counted. I do not know where you're getting those suggestions from. Wherever you're getting those suggestions from, ask them to prove it. Otherwise, you know you're being bluffed. Vinod says, I was in the army, got my reference letter from my commanding officer, but he is now commanding another establishment, so the letter has his present appointment. Is it fine? Yes, he must mention in that what was his previous role while you were working with him or for him. As long as that is mentioned, then absolutely fine. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Wow, it has again been 1.5 hours long. My God, this time seems to run very quickly, when I'm interacting with you. First of all, do subscribe to the channel. Come on, okay? All right, I need to get these numbers up. Thank you for joining in. I appreciate your having taken the time. This subject is extremely important, and a lot of people get confused. A lot of people make mistakes. I have seen so many refusals, so many rejections where people do not take care of their NOCs, and NOCs is the most important factor. I must have said it like 10 times already, but I keep saying this again. Please check your NOCs. Please make sure your NOCs match with what you have claimed for, and you will not have a problem. A lot of you who have joined the video today later, I would suggest that you watch the video from the beginning, because we went into a lot of details to explain what is required and how it is required. That will give you a lot of understanding of what you need to do. And that's it from me. Thank you so much. I